first say thank you everybody who is listening. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, and I'm glad to be back. And I'm especially glad to have Brandon Joe Williams on the show with me today. Super excited about what he is doing, what he is teaching people for free. I just think it's amazing, and I'd love my audience to know more about this. So, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Hello.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I have that we can go into. I was a real estate agent. I still have my license, so I'd be down to go into those type of things. But most importantly, I want to start off with you. What got you into this? How did your journey start with everything that you're doing, and now having your own law practice, and just the road that you're on right now?
Yeah, I was being attacked by the Employment Development Department. This was probably back in 2021. A friend of mine and I took over his father's landscaping company, and it was in pretty bad shape, but we saw a lot of good things, crews and a huge, it had been around since the 70s, so it had a huge client base and stuff. So I saw some real positives there. And the EDD decided they were going to show up one day and audit or whatever one of our job sites, which would be like a trespassing charge. It'd be a trespassing charge for coming onto the client's property without their permission, and then it'd be a trespassing charge for us coming onto our workspace without permission, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I had absolutely zero information about anything associated with the law or anything like that. So for me, it was just getting this $60,000 bill and then getting threatening phone calls and letters, and that was it, right? And
Right.
I was trying to figure out how I was going to solve this problem. So I went to a bunch of lawyers and accountants, and they all told me I should make a payment plan. And I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Actually, disgusting. Actually, I almost vomited every time I heard it. So I thought that lawyers and accountants had the answers to these kind of things, and that was kind of like when the veil started to get kind of pulled back, and I started to realize that these people don't have a fucking clue about anything. In fact, they probably have just as many answers as the homeless guy on the corner by the 7-Eleven. So I started to do my own research and kind of look into it more and more and more. And I went down several rabbit holes. And one of the rabbit holes that I went down was trusts, foreign trusts, private trusts. And so I learned how to put together foreign trusts and myself without a lawyer, without any. It's actually very easy. I teach it in my free course. It takes about 5 minutes of your time. It's not very difficult. And then get employer identification numbers, because you have to get EIN numbers to get bank accounts opened. So how do I get foreign EIN numbers from the IRS for those trusts? And then I just moved all of the assets and all of the credit card processing and everything else from the old corporation to these foreign trusts. And rather than using like W-9 tax forms, I started using like W-8 EXP forms, which is for like international organizations and stuff like that. And I told the EDD to go fuck themselves, and they did, shockingly enough. So that was basically the beginning of the journey, because at that time so many things had happened and so many questions had been posed and so many interesting doors had been presented, that even though I had solved the original problem that I was attempting to solve, I became absolutely fascinated with this whole world. And then before I knew it, I was going through all those doors, and then there was nine more doors for each single door, and then I went through all those nine, and then there was nine more behind each of those nine. And then before I knew it, I was at work on my phone doing law research all day, trying as hard as I can not to actually be at work. And then I wound up leaving my day job in September, October of 2023. And then I've been full time on this ever since. And that's like the timeline on it. And then my first website went up So I first started studying all this stuff with the EDD in the middle of 2021, probably about September. And then right around March, it was March 14th of 2022. That's when I launched my first version of my website. And then that's also when I started doing all the trust stuff with the EDD. And then by the summer of 2022, I had already defeated the EDD. And then that's when I launched the 1.0 version of my free contract killer course. And then that's pretty much when things started to really take off. I took on a publicist. I started doing, 5 or 6 shows a week. And then I was doing 5 or 6 shows a week for about a year. Um, and yeah, that's kind of when everything started to kind of really take off from there.
Beautiful. I love that. I love how, you're pushed to certain circumstances to find and seek the truth. And uh, the rabbit holes that you mentioned, it's once I started learning about all of this, it's like, shit, man, where the fuck do I start? And I've been on a 2-year journey with this in terms of like blowing my life up and not paying taxes, not just starting to unvolunteer myself. But I know now it's time to start taking action towards correcting the things that I need to be corrected or properly exit, I guess. But then I get confused because a lot of times it's like, well, with equity, you don't even need to do any of that shit. You just have to know who you are and put them on blast and go after them, right? But you have to know what you're doing. So it's a course in studying and spiritually growing, and then also having the cojones to go and fucking do that.
Yeah, the equity stuff is cool. I prefer the super deep, super intense commercial side of things, and the reason why is
Yeah.
because I'm trying to. This is going to sound crazy for your audience who isn't used to any of this information. I'm trying to get the government or a bank or something to issue me a black card that has no limit that I never have to make a payment on. And you think that's insane? It's actually very realistic. It's a very real thing. It's just not easy to obtain. You can't get something like that through equity, from my knowledge.
Right,
So,
right, right.
so until I start seeing someone going down that rabbit hole in equity or something like that, it's not something I'm going to be interested in. The core part of my research, and I would say about a year and a half into all of this is when I started to really get into researching infinite money. And then it took me about 9 months of research before I started talking about it.
Yeah.
And then since that time, it's pretty much been the main thing that I talk about and the main thing that everybody wants to hear about. So,
A
so
100%. I mean, who wouldn't want to hear about that infinite money and like you just live, you're not worried about anything and you're being creative and doing what the fuck you love and not worried about a damn thing. And I believe wholeheartedly that's what we're here to do. So
yeah.
I don't think it's a pipe dream. I don't think it's a fantasy. I honestly believe that that's where we're going. Eventually you won't even probably need a black card. It's just your energy and frequency, right?
Yeah, I
Maybe.
mean, there's the two main avenues economically that I see things going is either A, everybody gets a black card, or B, we get rid of this whole system and we go back on the gold standard. I actually think that's what's going to happen, and the reason why I think that's what's going to happen is because your typical American, your typical person, your typical man or woman, or whatever you want to call it,
Sure.
they are not a fan of this huge, massive, ultra complicated,
Yeah.
crazy maze. It should like the gold standard is so simple and so easy, and there's no inflation ever. And when you go back in time, there's even an article on Investopedia about this. So they talk about how like there was a time period, I think it was like 1874 to like 1914 or something, was like the pinnacle of the gold standard. There was like many countries on the gold standard. And that time period was the most abundant and the least amount of wars and difficulties internationally as well as domestically in every country. And it was like the golden years of like planet Earth in terms of the past couple 200-300 years. And So yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I don't think we're going to wind up with everyone having infinite money. I think infinite money is going to be a temporary thing where people who figure it out are going to have access to it for a short time, and then I think at that point we're going to be converting over to gold and silver based system like we saw in the 1800s. There's a time period in the 1800s that not many people are aware of called the legal tender cases, where we actually came off the gold standard and we went on to a monetary system like what we see today. And it was actually done temporarily just to solve some issues. And then it was actually repealed. We went back on the gold standard. So the history on this is also quite interesting because then we went back on the gold standard, and we were on the gold standard up until 1933 with the Emergency Banking Act.
Yeah.
And then the Emergency Banking Act was to prevent a run on the banks during the Great Depression, and it was supposed to be a very temporary solution. And then it wound up not being temporary at all, even though it was supposed to. And then we were in this kind of temporary emergency situation from 1933 all the way up until 1971. And then I believe it was Nixon or whoever who finally said, we're never going back on the gold standard. So he killed it. It was supposed to be an emergency that then like reverted back to a gold standard, just like it did during the legal tender cases. But Nixon killed it. So it went from an emergency for 30 years or 38 years, and then Nixon was the one who killed it. He said we're never going back to the gold standard, and then it basically converted that emergency status into a permanent status, and we've been in that. It's not called an emergency anymore, but it is.
Sure.
We're in an
We
emergency
are.
situation.
Yeah, a
So
hundred
that
percent.
that 1933 Emergency Banking Act and the emergency behind it is the world we live in today, March 4th, 2025. And then that's kind of where we start getting into, well, what is this? What is this world that we live in, right? And then that's when I
Yeah.
start getting into the flow chart and all this stuff. So
It's so interesting, and this applies worldwide. It's not just for America. A
yeah.
good portion of the countries. Speaking of the gold standard, what is your opinion about Trump and Elon with the whole thing with Fort Knox, and everybody should be know what's in there and all of that? Where do you think like the actual gold is, and what's your opinion on that? Who
No
knows?
idea.
No, who knows, right?
When you start getting into the Uniform Commercial Code and you start getting into like the Uniform Commercial Code Article 9, you start to realize that almost everything in the world is actually cut up into what's called security interests, right? What that
Mhm.
means is, like, for example, I can do a screen share. It says that I'm not allowed to do a screen share.
Oh
If you could
shit!
figure
Sorry.
out a way to activate that for me.
Yes, give me one.
Um, but I'll talk while you're trying to figure
Yeah,
that
yeah.
out. So, um, if you look on your certificate of title for your car, it has your name listed as registered owner. And if you start going down the rabbit hole of what a registered owner is someone who has the rights or the interest of the profits associated with an activity or using an activity for some kind of commercial purposes, right? So the problem that we're running into is that everything in the country operates underneath this thing called the Uniform Commercial Code, and nobody understands the Uniform Commercial Code. And when I say nobody understands the Uniform Commercial Code, lawyers don't get it. I've spoken to many lawyers, and they say that the Uniform Commercial Code or any sort of commercial code classes that they had in school were absolutely the most difficult, most horrifying classes, and that nobody in any of those classes understands any of that, and nobody really has any clue how anybody passed any of the tests associated with it. So the commercial code, the Uniform Commercial Code, or the state versions of the Uniform Commercial Code, has a Article 9, which I believe is the last section in the Uniform Commercial Code, talks about how things can be broken up into these various types of ownership or various types of interests, right? And what people don't understand is they see the word owner and they think that means that they own it and within the confines of what they think that word means, but they don't realize that the word owner has many, many, many different types of ownership and definitions. And it's just not nearly as simple as what people think. And it's all these assumptions that we have that keep us in this trap, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. It's number one, I don't know. I'm old and I don't know how to screen share. Or I mean, I put it in the my settings share and it doesn't show up though.
That's all
So
right. We'll do this show without it. It'll just
yeah, that's
be
cool.
a
I'm down
much
with that.
shorter show, probably. But that's all right.
Yeah, are you cool with that?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
fine with that.
cool. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, my bad, you guys. I should have set that setting up ahead of time. But anyhow, here we are. I like flowing with you either way. So
It's all good.
hopefully I don't think I'm unprofessional. But anyhow,
It's all good.
yeah. So in light of all of this, and more people catching wind and waking up to the reality that we're in, and the fact that most of what they're doing is illegal and legal, lawful. Obviously we all know that they have different meanings, but most people don't know, right? Just your average Joe and Jill have no idea that they're in this system. We all just arbitrarily sign up for it once we start doing our taxes or get our driver's license, just unknowingly giving our consent and volunteering. um for the layman's persons, for that average Joe and Jill, like what is the first? And I know everybody has different situations and they're all in the different points of their lives, but what is the first thing that you think somebody who knows a little bit about this or is interested in diving deeper, what they should do? What would be like the first step? Obviously your step was,
There is no should. There is no
oh,
should.
that want to.
The first thing that someone should do is shift their mindset because
Yeah,
they're already dumb and hanging themselves by even
right,
asking that question. Not to say
right.
that you are. Sorry. I mean
No, 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 all good, all
that's
good.
the fact of the situation because the thing is there is no that question can only be asked by you to yourself. There is
Sure.
no what should I do? That's like when I hear that question, like the way I translate that is Brandon, I have absolutely no control over my own life. I don't
Yeah,
know where
sure.
I'm going. I don't know what I want to do. What do you think I should do with my life? And it's just like the answer is you should go on a soul searching journey. That's the answer.
Absolutely. And
The answer,
I respect that. That's
yeah.
absolutely fair. Yeah.
So the answer to the question is you should go on a soul searching journey. That's the answer. And it might not have anything to do with the law. It might be more spiritual than legal, which honestly, frankly, is probably more often the case than legal. I think a lot of this legal stuff can help you find yourself. It's actually pretty shocking. And the reason why is because the legal stuff is so old and you're going through so many old texts and you're going to be going through a lot of things from the 1700s and the 1800s and people who were thinking very deeply. It's a lot of philosophy, not the recent stuff. Philosophy kind of exited the legal system probably around the mid 1900s, something like that.
Yeah.
But if you go before the mid 1900s, especially into the 1800s, especially like the middle of the 1800s, it's pretty much you say law, but you start reading the cases and stuff like that, and I would go almost so far as to say it's even more philosophy than law.
Hmm.
Um, it's philosophy that became law that was, and so what people think the law is today is pretty awful compared to what it was in its glory days, which I would say would be like, the 1800s or the late 1700s, but maybe the 1800s is when it started to get really formative and that kind of thing, especially up to the Civil War. So 1800 up to about, 1855, something like that. And So it's not that you couldn't find yourself through this sort of stuff, but I didn't really have that issue when I started studying all this.
Hmm.
So I don't know what someone would be experiencing. I think professionally, most people who don't have some sort of major occupation or professional interest, it is very, 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 very common because I did it and like hundreds of thousands of people that go through my shit do it. They realize in this information and what it stands for and what it means for the world and for their country, that they want to make it a professional choice or an occupational choice. So that's why you're seeing so many kind of gurus in this space exploding onto the scene. There's a new one, or sometimes even more than one every single day, it seems like. So, and the reason for that is because I think professionally, um, there's a lot of people who are kind of thinking they've never really found anything that really resonates with them or that they feel, um, like it was the kind of thing they wanted to kind of devote themselves to in a professional and long-term way. And I do believe that when someone starts to learn about all this stuff, there is going to be a huge percentage of people, because I've seen it with my own eyes constantly, that do recognize that this is something they've been looking for in terms of that specifically. So, but the question, who am I or what am I, is so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the professional or occupational aspect of a person's life is it really is, especially in today's economic commercial world where everything is commercial and governed by the commercial codes, which nobody understands that, but I do, and it is true. The professional aspect or occupational aspect can become your identity because it's just such a large part of existence on this plane, even though I think ultimately it's not necessarily, but it very well could be depending on the individual or what they are looking for or what they're trying to do. So I think it just depends on many factors.
Yeah.
There's also a
And
lot of people who just want to go and live in the forest and cut down trees and just kind of do their own thing. That obviously wouldn't fit that commercial mold.
sure, that's
Um,
more of like the equity type of passage. You leave me alone, I privatize, and all of that.
yeah.
So I love that answer, and I respect and appreciate that because it is everyone's own personal journey. And like I mentioned before, I am a realtor. I still have my license, but when I started learning about all of this information, my mind got fucking blown. I went through the notions, right? All the motions, right? I got pissed, I got angry, I got depressed. And then I started, questioning myself, like, well, how can I continue doing real estate knowing what I know with integrity? And so I kind of just a little bit just stopped for a while. um but
Stopped studying,
no, 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 not stop studying, stop
stopped real
selling.
estate.
Yeah, stopped real estate because I just
So
had
just real quick on that, I think that's an interesting, really fascinating point that I've never really talked about on shows and stuff. So the first thing is that this happens a lot. It happens to everybody, right? Because you start to look at the insignificance of your life. And when I say that, I say it in the nicest way, right? So I
yeah.
was I was I was running and building really successful dental offices, okay? And we specialized in a special kind of dentistry called biomimetic dentistry. It was like state of the art. We were saving people's lives through their teeth and we weren't doing crowns, and it's this whole cool thing. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to drpaulo'malley.com. I was the office manager for his office, and we have people flying in from all over the world to get this special kind of dentistry, which actually we promoted it so hard that that this type of dentistry actually exploded all over the world. And not to be egotistical, but we are the reason for it. And you can just type it in now, and you can find biomimetic dentists all over. But you'll see a lot of people who are fake, so you got to be a little careful. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like attorneys where you never know where anyone's at.
Right.
You just have to be a little careful to make sure that you're actually getting a good dentist. The two best ones that I know of in America are Dr. Matt Najad, obviously Dr. Paul O'Malley, the one I was with, and then there's a guy in New York. Damn, I forget his name. New York City. Anyways, I forget his name, but you can ask.
So is it just more holistic dentistry, or what is it
It's
exactly?
it's like holistic times like a billion. Okay.
Mm, okay.
So I was definitely doing something that wasn't the most unfulfilling thing in the world. It wasn't like
Sure.
I was shoveling dirt for nobody, you know.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel completely unfulfilled. But the amount of fulfillment that I felt for what I did before studying this information versus the amount of fulfillment that I felt after studying this information is obviously night and day. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
I am proud of what I did. I was very proud of what I did, but the amount of impact that a person can have in this world with the information I have now compared to what I was doing before is, literally like a billion fold difference, as as seen with what's going on. So the situation was interesting, right? And CPAs and attorneys are going to be and cops are going to be the worst ones here, right? But the thing is this, I say in my first course, which I don't recommend anybody watch. It's pretty awful. It was way back at the beginning, but it's still there. It's still
But
available.
you've updated everything, right? The contract killer course?
2.0, yeah, 2.0
Yeah.
was released on August 20th or something of 2024. So
Yeah.
2 years later, I released the 2.0 version, and then we'll probably get a 3.0 this year, probably in the summer or something. I'm still doing a lot of research. I try to get to some good breakthrough kind of points, some flags in the ground before I, design a whole new course. It took me 2 years to get the 2.0 going, but the
Right.
things are moving so much faster now. We have so many pieces of the puzzle. It's just like the speed and velocity is just getting so tremendous that the 3.0 is not going to take 2 years. It's going to be probably this summer, honestly. But anyways, so let's take for example a real estate agent, right? So
Yeah.
real estate it's interesting because you have two questions. The first question is, do I want to continue to do what I'm doing based off of this information, morally, ethically, and then also just from my own personal, just my own personal preference, just pure prerogative, right? The second question is, if I did want to do something different, or maybe I don't, how could I implement this information into what I'm already doing or been
Yeah.
doing to either A, make more money, at least for now, or B, like have it as like a bridging. Like how can I bridge what I'm doing now into this? Maybe I want to do this more, but I need to practice. I don't understand it. So how can I implement it into what I'm doing in order to better understand it, to move into this zone or whatever, right? It's like an implementation type mentality, right? Well, my answer would be
Absolutely.
my answer for a real estate agent would be getting involved in what's called adverse possession.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that is?
Yes, I mean, I know a lot of people are doing it where I think, right? I haven't studied it too much, but where they go into a home and then they claim it's theirs and they do it, by just putting on utilities and doing all these things. But I'd love for you to explain it with the proper definition.
So the guy who is the master at this, his name is Jaleel Bey, and his Instagram is where he does most of his promotion. And his
I'm
Instagram is
writing stuff down, by the way, because I'm
yeah,
always learning from you.
his Instagram is Moorish Lighthouse
Uh,
underscore official, right? And he is for sure the best I've ever seen in adverse possession. He used to do all sorts of different legal research, and then for whatever reason, he actually started to specialize in adverse possession. Now the first thing we have to cover in adverse possession, and I'm no master at it, so I'll
sure.
try my best, is the ethical and moral aspect of adverse possession, because that's what everyone is going to flip out about immediately. So first and foremost, definition of adverse possession, to the best of my knowledge, which I'm not, this is not my area of expertise.
Sure, I know it's
So
not
I'll
the
try my
wheelhouse.
best. Okay.
Yeah.
So adverse possession is when you have an abandoned property
Right.
where no one's there, no one's around, the windows are getting broken, there's spray paint on the, I mean, not really, but you get the picture, right?
Sure. Yeah. Abandoned.
Derelict property, right?
Yeah.
And you move into said derelict property that no one else has stated a claim to, and then you fix it up and you make it nice, thus increasing the overall property value in the area, thus increasing the beauty and interest in the area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, for example, Flint, Michigan, you see these pictures of these derelict entire streets filled with broken windows and crack houses and stuff like that, right? You could just move into one of those houses, you go through a series of legal processes. You fix up the house, you go through a series of legal processes, and you take legal ownership of the property through legal process, not by giving anyone what you think is money that's not. Now, first and foremost, the number one concern is everyone erupts into this protest, stating that that is some kind of squatter or some kind of whatever or whatever. Now, in order to understand the situation, we have to go back to the beginning of America and what America was founded by. America was founded by, and for those of you who are around my age, 39 years old, you can hearken back to the video game that was on the PC back in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe the late 80s, called the Oregon Trail. How does it work? So people were moving west and they would just see a plot of land on the prairie, and they would just say, this is a great spot to make a family. And they would just claim the land. And then if no one else claimed that land, then bada bing, now that land is theirs until at some point in the future, someone does state a claim against that land. And then as the court systems and stuff started to develop, that's what became the basis of the entire court system, and then also the county recorder. So that system is literally the entire brainstem, spinal cord, and skeletal structure of the entire United States of America. The county recorder was at the beginning. It still is, even though they're bastardizing everything. So like in LA, it's been kind of destroyed. But if you still go out in the middle of nowhere in most states, Montana, middle of nowhere, Arizona, middle of nowhere, in most states, it's still intact. A lot of our America is still intact. People just forget about it. You can still find the county recorder, and you go in, and it's really just people filing documentation involving claims of ownership to some sort of car, object, asset, business, or piece of land. So if I state a claim for a piece of land and nobody else states a claim for that piece of land, then legally, through the county recorder and through the court system and everything else, I gain legal title, right? So the way that this works in its most basic sense, and this is as old as 1776, okay? I state a claim on a car, or let's say, for example, there's an abandoned car and it gets towed to a tow yard and nobody ever comes and picks it up. So if you start going down the rabbit hole of how does the tow yard or the auction center or whoever else, how do they end up getting legal title to this so-called property so that they can sell it or move it or crush it or whatever? You got to think it's the same exact process that a towing company would go through for a derelict car as you would go through in adverse possession. So the first thing is,
nobody's claiming the car, right? So
the first thing is you state a claim.
Yeah.
This is mine. That's just that simple. State a claim. Now, at that point, typically what you're going to see, and you see this even with trademarks, by the way, when you do a trademark on something, it's the same process. You state a claim to the trademark, and then what do they have you do? They have you place an ad in the newspaper for 90 days. So you'll see this over and over and over again. You'll see this with alcohol licenses for bars. You'll see this with everything. They have to attempt. So if there's a person of record, so let's say, for example, I buy a car from somebody and I have a bill of sale. Okay. Now, what people don't realize is you don't have to go to the DMV at all. The DMV has nothing to do with anything. The DMV is an optional step, right?
Right.
But there's actually additional optional steps prior to that point. So you got the bill of sale. You own the vehicle through the bill of sale. The bill of sale is a private contract. It's also a quitclaim deed, same kind of term that you're going to see in real estate. What is the definition of a quitclaim deed? It's just a piece of paper that shows that somebody has released ownership interest in a piece of property. Quit claim. It's the same term. Claim. Make a claim for property. I claim this property. What's the reverse of a claim? A quit claim.
Right.
I quit my claim, because you also got to think too. A claim is it goes through time. Claim, 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 claim. If you're living in it, claim, claim. It's like your claim, 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 claim. You're there. If you're painting the wall, it's claim, 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 claim. So the idea of claim is more than just verbal. It's actions. It's the physical location of your body being inside of it. It's you moving it around, right?
Yeah.
So getting into a car, having keys, getting into the car, changing the oil, these are all claims. So a quit claim is on paper saying, I no longer have a claim over this, and you're pushing it away. So now what you have is you have this quit claim deed or bill of sale, however you want to call it, right? Now there's three things you can do with it. Number one, nothing. Meaning you just stick it in a file and you never go to the DMV and you never go to the county recorder and you don't do anything. Now, in the future, someone tows the car because they look it up in the computer. They can't find any ownership. They can't find any claim. So what do? It's a derelict, abandoned piece of property, basically. So they do the exact same process on your car as you would for adverse possession. So there's a second option. The second option is you can go to the county recorder and you can record the claim or ownership on that vehicle, print off that claim, and then you can send that to the DMV or to whoever else. But the thing is that now in the future, if they tow your car because they think it's abandoned, you can provide evidence in two different ways. So you haven't even gone to the DMV yet. You can provide evidence in the first way, which is that you have this private quitclaim deed called a bill of sale. And then at that point, if they wanted to question the validity of the bill of sale, blah, blah, blah. So for example, one of the best ways to have a bill of sale is to actually have it notarized by both parties.
Interesting.
That makes it a really, 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 or have two witnesses. So two people standing on both sides, right? The super idea would be one party that is with the seller and one party is with the buyer. That way it's not too much on one side of the seesaw, right?
Yeah.
So the brother of the seller comes to the sale and the sister of the buyer comes to the sale. Signature here, signature here. The witness on this side knows the buyer. The witness on this side knows the seller, and then there's a witness line. And then ideally, underneath the witness line, it would be relation to transaction, brother of buyer. Right. And then the other witness signs here, and then if the signature, you can't read their name, you would have name below that written in print. That way you can always locate that person in the future. Let's say there was a witness that needed to come into court because they were placing this particular quitclaim deed in questionability. Let's say the tow truck company said, oh, that looks like a fraudulent document. Okay, so now we have to bring in the witnesses into the court case to testify to the fact that they were there when this bill of sale took place. You see?
Yeah.
So if you have the private bill of sale and you never go anywhere, you never record it, and you never go to the DMV, if for some reason the car was taken because no one knew that there was this quitclaim and this new claim that took place with the property, then at that point you would have to prove that in a court of law. Now, the second option is to get that bill of sale recorded. Now, what that does is that basically broadcasts to the world in a very, very public way that this particular transaction, this quitclaim transaction, took place. That solidifies your ability to prove that you've stated this claim and that you've claimed this particular piece of property. Now, you wouldn't be able to run adverse possession process on somebody who's doing something like that because people think that with adverse possession, you can steal other people's shit. You can't. You can only take things of which have no claimant, right? So the thing is that when you start to understand this process, people oftentimes what they do is they have a second filter where they start to get upset and they start to say that, well, the bank owns it and you're screwing the banks over. That's a whole nother deep rabbit hole. You cannot screw over a bank. In fact, banks do nothing but screw you and fuck you every single
A
way. The
hundred
most
percent.
unpleasurable if we start, I'm not going to get into all that on this show because I don't want to be, that's like an hour and a half right there. Boom. We're not going to get into that. That is ridiculous. Before, 1970, people owned their own property. The banks didn't own everything under the sun and moon and stars. Because we came off the gold standard, that's when the banks started gobbling everything up, and now they own everything under the sun, moon, and stars. It's all fraud. When we start going down that rabbit hole, how that works, it's absolutely ridiculous. You can see a lot of my information on that. It's all part of the infinite money breakdowns and everything. So that hopefully is not something that the listener is going to have a problem with. The main problem is just the ethics and morals associated with getting something for free or not paying for it or whatever, which is a lot of what I've already explained, right? So
Yeah.
at the beginning of America, there was no I have to pay for it. Even if you wanted to pay someone for it, the only way you'd be able to pay someone for it is by someone lying to you saying that it was theirs and they'll sell it to you because the everything was just up for grabs, literally, right? And our country is not that old. So you also got to
No.
think too, like even to this day, there's unclaimed land all over the place. And you can just, out here where I'm at in California, if you head east about 2 hours, it's just literally just endless desert that no one would ever want for free even.
Yeah.
You can go out there and live out in the middle of nowhere in the desert for nothing. You can just move your shit out there and build a house and do adverse possession and you'll be just fine. I mean,
The desert's fucking hot though. I mean, I'm in the marina, so I'm in Marina Del Rey. So
there's
we
literally no one out there. I've been out there and there's over by the Salton Sea and stuff like that. There's literally nothing out there. I mean, you won't
yeah.
see a house for 20 minutes of
Oh, I
driving.
know. Is that where the slow Jamistan
That's
people
correct. Yeah.
are?
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. I love this whole movement. I love learning about all of this. And that's why I went through a whole little I'm going through a process. This is what I would love in terms of real estate, hone in on, not adverse possession necessarily, but land patents. How can I get people, homeowners to realize that the bank is just robbing them? Also, the property taxes, that it's just a subscription fee, all of this stuff that I'm learning about. That's why I just had to stop and regroup and say to myself, okay, what do you want to continue this? And if so, how are you going to continue this? And in what way can you be of service and use this information? It's going to require me studying more, obviously. But this is what I want to do because I'm already in the field. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah,
have
and there's
a
a lot of creative things you can do if you wanted to get into discharging mortgages and discharging um, property taxes. You're going to be getting heavy into the litigation side of things.
yeah,
You're going to be
yeah.
getting into a lot of battles and warfare. If you wanted, that's why I brought up the adverse possession thing, because the adverse possession thing is not, it's actually going to be very, very easier, much easier
Right.
than trying to discharge mortgages and stuff like that. So let's say, for example, you have a entire section of a town, like again, Flint, Michigan is what comes to my mind, right? And you can take like an entire block or multiple blocks, and it's just house after house after house, and they're all abandoned, right? You could get, like a list of people who want to move someplace all together, who maybe they have like a community together or something like that. You can do checks and title checks and all this kind of stuff on all those properties. And you can take a whole swath of a section of land or an entire abandoned area of a city or whatever, and you can move, 50 or 100 or 200 people into that zone and just adversely possess the entire sector, the entire zip code.
That's fucking awesome.
So basically, what you'd be doing at that point is you would basically be like a land developer, essentially, and
Right.
you would hold like a trust portfolio, and then as the adverse possession cycles for each of the properties go forth, once the legal title to each individual property had been possessed, it would go into your trust portfolio. So at that point, what you're doing is you're building this whole world essentially for free, and you don't even need investors.
Right. That's so interesting. And then it's just it's interesting how that can happen, and then how you would contract, and I say contract, like the community that let's say that 200 people would contract and hire, the kind of similar to Slow Jamistan, right? They would hire their own firefighters, they would hire their own police department. I've been telling
No, no,
people.
you can contract with local police,
Oh,
or at least
yeah.
try. You can at least
Right.
try. So at that point, what would happen is you would be like the mayor of your little zip code,
Right.
essentially, because you're basically the trustee of the trust that holds title to all of the properties that are coming in. Once the legal process is completed, it goes into this kind of trust, right? Now, the way that that works, even if you look in the United States Code, the definition of foreign state, which is 8 USC 1101 subsection A14, states that at that point in time, depending on how the trust was written, if the trust was written specifically that it wasn't part of the United States, which we're not going to go down that long, cute, crazy rabbit hole. But as long as the trust indenture itself states that very clearly and states what the relationship is between that sector and the United States, that area would be legally defined as a foreign state under 8 USC 1101 subsection A14. Now, what that means is that it becomes a completely autonomous nation, the same way that like a Cherokee tribal zone would be, where you see the police can only drive up to the very entrance. They can report or ask for compliance, and then the tribal police is the only police that can actually police that zone. It would be that exact same functionality. In fact, you could literally call your zone a tribal zone, and it would actually interface into the United States in the best way possible if you simply just called it a tribe.
Mm.
If you call it a foreign state, less people are going to know what that means. If you call it a tribal state or tribal nation, most people in the Department of State, the Department of the Interior, etc., know what that means. Um, you can do it either way. You don't have to say you're a tribe. It's just a little bit of an easier interface. You can say you're just simply a foreign state under 8 USD 1101 subsection A14. Now, at that point, everything that's going on with that sector or zone would be contractual. And what I mean by that is, yes, if you wanted to start your own fire department or your own police or sheriff's office, that's fine. Or you can pay or contract to have your zone or whatever integrated into the main system of some local establishment.
Mm.
Because
Okay.
you also got to think there's a lot of unincorporated counties that still exist all over the entire country. So if your local county is unincorporated, they typically wouldn't even have a police department. Unincorporated counties only have sheriff departments and police, fire departments, and then oftentimes they'll have county recorders. Unincorporated counties, you're pretty much looking at your original America still.
Mm.
And that's why I told you a lot of the original America is still here.
Right.
We have two
Okay.
different Americas. We have two
Yeah.
different Americas. You see the new incorporated fucked up America in a lot of the big cities more and more and more than you do. If you go to Montana, what you're going to experience, or Oklahoma is probably actually the best state because it's like 80% Indian tribes or 60% or whatever. Oklahoma, Montana, these places, you're going to experience a lot of the old America. You're not going to see anywhere near as much of this new America as you would in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago, something like that, right? But even in Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, we have both Americas operating
Yeah.
fully. In Montana, we also have both Americas operating fully. It's just that in LA, it's 95% new America, 5% old America. In Montana, it's probably more like the opposite, 95% old America, 5% new America.
Yeah, I guess it's just based on your lifestyle and what you want to do for your future. Moving out, getting into the old America, or staying in the city. Because you're a young guy, you're 37, you're still in the city. Does your Amnesty Coalition, is that like the direction you're headed into, creating like a coalition, obviously with members and that type of thing, or what is that about?
Yeah, I have my own nation. It's called the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition. The way that it's structured is very similar to the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, which is an extremely old organization.
Hmm.
That is the organization that I have based the skeletal structure of my nation based off of, which is a lot different than like Slowjamistan. Slowjamistan, he's just having fun and he's been to like almost every country on the planet. So he's not doing it from a legal perspective. He's doing it
Sure.
from he's literally been to like almost like every country. Like he's been to like every UN country and like he's a big traveler and he's just seen like everything. So for him, it's a travel culture based, fun based, like almost like let's get away from all of this craziness and just have fun and remember what it's like to have fun kind of basis for his nation, right? Whereas my nation does definitely have a lot of that in it, and that's why I'm actually a member of parliament of Slowjamistan because I love what he does so much, and I think what he's doing is going to change the world. But what I do is that, but then I would say that's all infused into what I do for sure, 100%. We got to have fun. It's the most important thing. But the legal side and the political side is like it's like 50-50 for me.
Yeah, yeah,
50% legal, political, and then 50% fun and all this kind of stuff, right? So for me, everything about my nation is the real deal. We do have fun. It is kind of goofy. There's a lot of goofiness, but all the paperwork and everything is like very, very, very specific. The legal structure is very specific. The contracts are very specific, right? So,
yeah,
so, so my nation is based on the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and then the way in which our nationality operates is the way that I've structured it is the same way that nationality works between American Samoa and the United States. So if you start going down that rabbit hole, American Samoa is a unincorporated, unorganized U.S. territory. And the Samoan people that live there were very, very concerned about getting citizenship through the United States because they thought that by getting citizenship, it would erode their extremely old culture and religious activities and stuff like that, right? So what happened was is that they have this very unique kind of contract with the United States. It's called being a non-citizen national of the United States. So people don't realize nationality and citizenship are two totally separate things.
yeah.
Nationality comes first, and then citizenship builds off of nationality. Nationality is created through pledging allegiance, and then citizenship is created through now that you've already pledged allegiance, now you're also pledging subjugation.
Right.
And that's basically the whole subject in a sentence. It took me 2.5 years of nonstop research to be able to explain all that in a sentence. But basically, so the way that American Samoa is set
Let's
up,
get to that.
thank you. The way that American Samoa is set up is American Samoans, when they're born, they are non-citizen nationals. So they have that first layer of nationality through allegiance, but they do not have the second layer of subjugation because that culture was very concerned and is still very concerned about the fact that they believe that citizenship will begin a slow and agonizing process of basically eroding their glorious culture and their glorious religious activities that are very, very old. So basically, that structure that we see between American Samoa and the United States is the same structure that I took and used for the Nation of the Embassy Coalition. We do not offer citizenship. We
Mm,
only offer non-citizen nationality.
got it. Okay.
So combining the what I've learned from the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, combined with the contractual structure of citizenship and nationality between American Samoa and United States, I was able to concoct what I believe to be one of the coolest overall political structures available on the planet.
I love your coat of arms, by the way, too.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Do you own a bulldog?
So my best friend, one of my best friends, he has this bulldog. We lived together for many years, and the bulldog was like my best friend in the world. We spent all our time together, and a lot of my research and stuff was done with him, literally right by my side. And I wrote my two. I have two books that I wrote that aren't involving law. I wrote those with him right there next to me, and we actually ended up having to put him down recently. He got very
Oh,
old. He's 16 years old, and his legs are about
that's
four
awesome.
inches long. He looks like a big potato.
Oh,
And sadly, he was just barely able to walk, couldn't see, couldn't even hear, couldn't control bathroom activities. It was just
oh.
he was that was the end. We took him all the way to the 99.99 yard line, and then if we would have waited any longer, his standard of living would have gotten very, very poor within literally days. That's how close we were to. So we decided that was it. So
All right. Well, 16 years though for a dog is a good run, man.
yeah, oh yeah. So
Totally.
that's the basis of there's actually a whole section about him on the questions and answers page.
Oh, really? I have
If
to
you
look it
scroll
up.
down all the way down near the bottom, you'll see a whole section about Blue. Yeah,
Okay, sweet,
he
sweet.
was the motivation behind the Bulldogs. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, and I don't want to take too, I don't know how much time you have. I didn't even ask you this before we got
No, we
on,
can
but
go a little bit
we're
longer. We can go a little bit
we're
longer.
we're flowing, and you're
Yeah.
doing a great, amazing job, and I love learning from you. I mean, all this shit blows my mind, and I love learning and deep diving, and sometimes I get overwhelmed. I'm like, which direction do I want to take this information? And I want to start taking action steps, and I know that you're a Californian, right? You're
Yeah.
not. Yeah, you're a Californian. You're also a national. You're not a US citizen. um, how long did it take you to do that process, to change everything over, and was it complicated, or was it just super easy?
It's a very long answer, and the reason why is because
That's okay.
you know what people don't realize is when you were born and that birth certificate was processed, there's something called a sole proprietorship, which is a special, very unique kind of business was opened of your name in all capital letters. People call that the straw man and all this.
Yeah.
I went down, it was up until December of last year is when I finally figured it out, and I have actual evidence, which I can't show because we don't have a screen share.
Sorry.
That's all right. But I'm talking about it a lot on a lot of my shows and stuff, and it's in my
Yeah.
course and everything. So if you want to see all the evidence, we go through the SS5 form, we go through the Code of Federal Regulations, and we kind of piece it all together and kind of prove everything pretty
And
well.
I'll put links in the show notes, everybody, so
So what it is it's just a business.
okay.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
business. It's
You're
called a
just
sole proprietorship. When you look in the United States Code and the Code of Federal Regulations, the sole proprietorship is called an individual. So every time you see the word individual, people believe that's them. That's not you at all. It's the sole proprietorship. Individual, if you go down the historical timeline of that term, it used to be called individual proprietorship. And then for whatever reason, they were able to get rid of the second word. So now it's just individual. Individual is a shortening of individual proprietorship.
mm,
Another term to describe an individual proprietorship is a sole proprietorship. So what you're looking at is you're looking at a sole proprietorship, and every time you have your name in all capital letters, they're referring to a sole proprietorship, right? So what's happening in this country is you get these bills sent to you, and it has this name on it that you think is yours because it has the same overall letters. But what they're actually talking about is a business. And they expect you to act as though you are the owner of that business. But then you start going down the rabbit hole of what owner means. It's got 8 million different definitions, right? So basically, what they're hoping you do is just simply act as the owner, and then now their presumptions become truth because they assumed that you are the owner, and then you act as the owner, and then now that becomes truth and law. That's basically how everything works, right? So now it works the same way with car titles and stuff like that too. So if you go to the DMV and you register your car, the name on the registered owner means a person who has the right or security interest associated with the profits associated with using some kind of activity commercially, by the way. So your name in all capital letters, which is the sole proprietorship, is listed as the registered owner. So what that means in English is that your sole proprietorship has the security interest over the profits associated with using this vehicle commercially. And I know that's a lot of words to describe what's written there, but that's basically what it is in a nutshell.
Right.
And so basically, the problem that everyone is running up against is they believe that the name on all the documentation is them, when in actuality, it's their business, right? And if you start going down the rabbit hole of U.S. citizen and stuff like that, a U.S. citizen can be an estate, a trust, a partnership, an association, or any other legal fiction, right? Since the sole proprietorship is a person, and since that person was born in the District of Columbia, that person is a U.S. citizen. So the thing is that you start going down the rabbit hole of what a U.S. citizen is that you are not a U.S. citizen, but you have a U.S. citizen.
Mhm.
And that is essentially the entire matrix in a nutshell. On a lot of these shows, usually what I do is I walk down through screen share all this stuff, but it takes like 2 to 3 or 4. I just did 2 shows that were both 4.5 hours each. So
Yeah, I can't wait to hear them. So I'll
yeah,
be.
so I do a lot of shows talking about and walking you down how all of this works and how it became to be and what court cases caused all this to be this way and everything, right? There's really only one court case that you really need to read to understand almost all of this, which is the slaughterhouse cases of
Mm.
1873.
I was just watching that video last night. Okay.
So if you go on Google Scholar and you click the case law button and you type in the slaughterhouse cases, and then you read that whole opinion that was given mostly by Samuel Freeman Miller, Justice Miller, the way that the government can create corporations whenever they want to essentially achieve their goals is explained in detail in the slaughterhouse cases. The birth of the U.S. citizen category being different from and independent from a citizen of one of the states was born in the slaughterhouse cases. The entire explanation of the first line in the 14th Amendment is described in very simple English in the slaughterhouse cases. The entire passport system, all nationality, all citizenship, all taxation, is pretty much explained in the slaughterhouse cases because the entire tax code only applies to resident aliens and U.S. citizens. And when you realize that you aren't either of those things, but you have a business that is those things, everything becomes very clear because you don't have a tax liability. You have a business, and that business has a tax liability, and that business has the same letters of your name. It's just that it's typically spelled in all capital letters.
Mhm.
And that's really the simplicity because there's been this extreme fighting that's been going on for over 100 years. Is the income tax unconstitutional? And you see all these conservatives and they say, yes, it is. And you see all these liberals and they say, no, it's not. The correct answer to the question, when you dig deep enough and you get all the actual answers, is the answer is actually that it is not unconstitutional. That is the correct answer. And the reason why is because the income tax system has never, ever, ever in the entire history of the income tax, they have never, ever, ever directly taxed a man or a woman. The
Mm.
problem is just that no one knows that. That's the problem.
Yeah, because
It
it's the
would be
business.
unconstitutional if there wasn't a sole proprietorship.
Right.
So
Fuck it.
because they
Shit,
stuck
Brandon.
this thing in between the taxes and you, called a sole proprietorship, called a business,
Yeah,
they're not taxing you directly. If they taxed you directly, that would be extremely illegal and unconstitutional.
sure.
They
Sure.
aren't taxing you directly. They're just tricking you into thinking they are. They're not. They never have. It's never happened, ever.
Fuck. My
No
mind
man or
is
woman has ever been directly taxed ever in the entire history that I know of up until the tax system that we know of today. Maybe in the 1800s, there was something like that. Direct taxes have to be apportioned as per the Constitution. So I would need to dig and see if anywhere in the 1800s there may have been an apportioned direct tax. Wouldn't surprise me. That would be constitutional to do, by the way. The current system that we have is 100% completely and utterly constitutional.
fuck. Interesting. So
You
what?
you have never been directly taxed. Sales tax
Right.
is not a direct tax. You can actually just simply decline to pay sales tax. If they ask you for a sales tax exemption number, you can literally just make it up. They'll type it in and it'll get approved in the computer. There is no sales tax exemption code system that's been codified. You would say 752316, and they go 712356, enter, and it'll process, and you'll see it on your receipt as no sales tax exemption, or you just simply won't see it on the receipt at all. So that's very, very easy to get around. State tax piggybacks off of the federal income tax. They even say that in the statutes. So the federal income tax is only and exclusively an excise tax that's imposed on the sole proprietorship. And you can actually look up on the IRS website, type in sole proprietorship IRS into Google and look it up. And they tell you it's an unincorporated business. And whenever you use just your name, like if you say Brandon Joe Williams Plumbing, it wouldn't be a sole proprietorship. But if you're just doing business as Brandon Joe Williams, they process it as a sole proprietorship. Well, the thing is that no one's ever asked, where in the flying fuck did this thing come from? I have this sole proprietorship. They're always assuming that I'm using that. All the bills and everything that I get are to that thing. Where did this thing come from? I never filed to open up a sole proprietorship of my name in all capital letters, right?
Mm,
Now, to me, the only place it could have come from is the birth certificate, but that I don't have anything directly linking direct evidence to say that the birth certificate birthed the sole proprietorship. The only piece of evidence that I have to link those two things together is if you type into Google, is the articles of incorporation of a company the birth certificate of the company? Google will tell you yes, and there's many articles on this. The articles of incorporation is considered the birth certificate of the business. But then when you reverse the question and you say, is my birth certificate essentially an articles of incorporation for some sort of business entity? Everything says, no, you're a sovereign citizen, psychopathic conspiracy theorist. So to me, if the logic works in one direction and it doesn't work in the other direction, I start to ask questions. It doesn't make sense to me, right? The sole proprietorship came from somewhere. So if it didn't come from the birth certificate, then I need someone else to tell me where in the flying fuck it came from. If someone wants to sue me or the IRS wants to sue me in a court of law, that'll be the first question I ask in discovery. Where in the fuck did this thing come from? And I'll tell you right now, they would sooner drop the case than answer that question. There's no fucking way anyone's ever going to answer that question. So just by asking that question, you're going to win the case. I don't think anyone will ever answer that question, ever. I think they'd sooner just run away or drop the case. There's no fucking way anyone in the government's going to answer that kind of a question. It's just never going to happen. So I would rather the case continue so I can keep asking these kind of questions. I would love if the IRS sued me. It'd be the greatest day of my life. I'd be I'd be going to bed at night with a workbook and a pen, and it'd just be discovery questions, and it would just be page after page after page after page, and my research would go so much faster if the IRS sued me, because I'd start getting answers to questions that take me years to figure out. But that's why no one ever sues me, because I'm very clear about that's exactly what I'll be doing. And they don't want anybody asking you this question. So what do? They leave me the fuck alone. So maybe if I could turn back time, I would have pretended like I was very scared to get sued. I would have pretended that I had no idea what was going on. Appear weak when you are strong, Sun Tzu. And then I would have had them sue me, and then I would have surprised them with all these discovery questions. But the thing is that even if I would have done that, they would have just dismissed the case. So I'm not going to get the answers either way. So it's kind of an irrelevant question. It's an irrelevant conversation. But I actually really enjoy figuring all this out. It's to me, it's like a big treasure map.
Yeah.
It's like an old, it's like trying to find buried treasure of some old pirate gang from hundreds of years ago. And it's like this long, and there's all these different places and caverns and secret locations and skulls that you turn. And then you go into this lower area, and then you find out there's a map down there, and it's to some island off of the Philippines. And then now you have to, there's a video game called Uncharted where they do this. They're chasing after this guy named Avery's treasure, and they go all over the world, and they go to all these different locations and secret caves and all this stuff, and they find this map, and then the map's to a different location, and then they have to go and travel there now, and they go from place to place to place looking for Avery's treasure. And I feel like I'm looking for Avery's treasure. And I guess if you were to answer like what is Avery's treasure, like when you get through that last door and you go in, what's in the room? Well, the answer to that question would be, the destruction of the 14th Amendment or infinite money, or both. When the 14th Amendment is destroyed, the infinite money thing won't work anymore, because then we automatically go back to a gold and silver system. So I'm okay with that. I guess a better answer would be, gold standard, go back on the gold standard, or infinite money, or infinite money for a while until we go back on the gold standard. I think that would be a more realistic answer.